For the slider, for some reason, isn't sliding back.
It's not going that way?
It'll slide to one side, but not the other.
Okay. Well, we'll see how this does. It's sliding now.
Nico, you can man that, and Joel's over here.
Yeah,
Why don't you guys do the switch then, and let's get it going. And are the phones off?
Is it? Yeah, are your phones off?
Yeah. Well, mine's
Is this
all
one
silent.
recording?
Not yet.
Okay. So we got plenty of space, so we can start recording.
So just so you know, Joel and I taught at UCSC together.
Oh, okay.
Great athlete too, brother great athlete.
Cool.
Santa Cruz High, both. And we also taught the film stuff up there.
Oh, cool.
So, together. So, and of course I love Tommy. So they asked me to come in and kind of help with this. And I said, well, we've got to get Leroy in here. And because I've always loved your stories about working with the family.
So, I mean, I could just do that.
Yeah, just do that.
Then there's...
A lot of good stories,
It's already
Jeffrey.
clicking there. Because we're not going to
So
hear that because he's mic'd.
who was
He's
sick
got the
today?
laugh.
Pardon me?
Was it
Kirby
Rich
was
who was?
sick. Yeah, Rich.
Rich Kirby was,
Hear this?
he worked at Wilson's when I went to work at Wilson's. And, but he wasn't there. I think he was in the service. And he got out of the service. And that's when I first met
And
the
is that
Kirbys.
Craig's dad?
It's Craig's dad.
And how is Craig?
Not good.
What did I heard?
He moved to Montana, to Dillon, Montana.
Uh-huh.
And he had some heart issues. And he was getting prepared to have some heart surgery this week or in about a week, and he had a stroke Friday, and
No, this just happened.
yeah, the recent thing was last Friday, and he's doing okay. They got him to a hospital right away, and but it's delayed the surgery that he needs for about 6 weeks.
Okay. I had a stroke incident about 6 months ago
Wow.
that's triggered this whole thing, but I'm fine now.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So he's up in Montana, and that's where he's going to be. He's
Where is
Dillon.
Dillon compared to like Bozeman or?
It's about 150 miles south of Missoula.
Oh, okay.
It's very close to Clark Canyon Reservoir,
Yeah. This is not the.
where we go
where
hunting.
my
I'm
dad
going.
was.
I'm going up there hunting in about the 20th of November.
And are any of the Rinaldi kids going?
Yeah.
Ricky.
No, Gino Jr. and Big Gino, and I'll be driving together.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably 30 years we've been going up there hunting now.
You got a kid?
Leroy, here we go.
Okay.
1, 2.
1, 2.
All right. Leroy, we were talking a little bit. I remember my first memories, you were working for Wilson. And one of the things I remember is, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seemed to me like you and George were close.
We
Talk to
became
me
very
about it.
we became very close. I was a little fearful of him because when I first went to work there in 1957, I was probably 19 years old, and I had an accident at the gate backing up one of the trucks, and I believe he was in Hawaii on vacation when they hired me, and so he asked me what happened to the truck, and I told him what happened, and he told me, if you can't drive the trucks, just stay out of them. So that's how I learned about George H. Wilson Inc. and the senior Mr. Wilson. Yeah.
When I was a kid, though, you guys seemed like you were pretty close.
We were. We became. I did everything I could to make sure I did things right and please him after that episode. And I mean, I was in my glory going to work there and just learning a trade. So it was really good for me.
You told me that you hadn't been a plumber until you there was a story you told me about how you got told that there was an opening there.
No, I just needed a job. I was looking for a job and knocked on the front door, And at that time, the purchasing agent, Ed Wellbrook, hired me
Oh, he hired you just directly?
directly. Uh-huh.
Okay. Talk a little bit about Mr. Wilson's personality, George.
He was a serious guy, but he deserved a lot of respect. Everybody respected George H. Wilson, Tommy's grandpa, and everybody worked hard there. It was a union shop, and everybody tried to make things work. And there was a lot of respect for the company from everybody that I knew, and I knew that I wanted to stay there and go to work there. I was worked in the shop outside for a couple of years and became an apprentice, and before had 5 years into it, I was running work for him.
So you moved up pretty quickly there.
I did. I went to 4 years of night school, which was a plumber apprentice school. It was required, and I excelled at that, and I wanted to run work for him, and I ended up running a lot of big jobs for him.
What were some of the big jobs you wound up running?
Oh my goodness. Wrigley's addition, Wrigley's add-on to the building. Worked up at Lockheed a lot. Did College 5, graduate student housing. Worked on all the science buildings up at the university. A lot of pretty good sized jobs. I did that high-rise down on Dakota Street. An old plumber there that I was working with had it about half done. His name was Doug Christensen, and he was an old steam fitter. And they sent him over to do a job right here, down here. Ginny, my wife, worked for him, Plantronics. And so I was an apprentice, and they left me to finish the job, and I finished that job on Dakota. And that was probably my first start as a foreman running work. And then my first job really was the telephone company on Center and Walnut Street. They added a story to that, and I probably my first foreman job for them.
What did it mean to you to be named a foreman for George H. Wilson? I mean, that had to be a pretty positive thing in your life.
Oh, it was. You know, I was married and had 2 children already. Got married when I was 19, 20. I was 20 and my wife was 19. And so my life changed. I wanted to work. And so apprentice training was good for me. And I think I just kind of lucked into something that I excelled at.
You loved it. I mean,
Yeah, I did.
Your
I
whole
loved
life,
it.
really.
Yeah.
What
And
was
every
it about plumbing that you just loved? I mean, talk a little bit about that.
doing a job, getting it done, and making money for Wilson Company. That was a big deal to me. And I had a man that worked with me. He worked there long before me, Billy Kirby, and he and I did a lot of big jobs. And our whole gig was just to get them done, and we did them, and we did them fast. And I believe we made good money for Wilson's, which was our object.
One thing I've noticed, you seem to have a real loyalty, and it seemed like people who work for Wilson had a loyalty to the company. I mean, you identified as being a George H. Wilson employee and
Yeah.
whatever. What was that about?
Well, they were definitely the best company to work for. They were progressive. They were bidding all the big jobs, and it was a thrill for me to be a foreman on a big job. It was a thrill for me just to work on a job. I learned from a lot of top mechanics. Bob Johnson was a foreman for them, and he taught me so much. Worked on the first science building under him at the University of California. It was called Thiemann Lab, which is also NatSci 1. And Bob Johnson was out of the oil fields, self-taught, and he taught me a lot of tricks, a lot of work, how to do things without telling me very much. When you work with Bob, you learn by watching, and he was tough. I remember telling him one time how I thought I did on a job for him that was part of NatSci 1. It was a Coliseum out there, a lecture hall, big lecture hall. And he said, "You did all right, but you can always do better." He told me that. Never asked him again how he thought I did. It was so that's the kind of guys I learned from. Doug Christian, he was an old steam fitter, taught me a lot about steam fitting and installing boilers. And I just learned under a lot of really good men.
What does the term steam fitter mean?
He was from back east, and his boiler work, steam work. There were not a lot of boilers and steam on our west coast, but if there was, they got a job that required that kind of work, Doug Christensen would do the work. And so I learned a lot from him because I got to work with all the best foremans. I mean, there were many, many good foremans. I got to work back in the time when Franz Baum.
Yeah.
You remember Franz Baum?
Yeah.
He had to leave Santa Cruz. He was one of the best plumbers ever. And he liked to drink a little bit. And he got into trouble a couple times. And the last time he had to get out of California because he might end up in jail. And he moved to Alaska, and he worked in the bush, and he's still working in the bush. And he's my age, very close. He used to work on Walking Charlie on the wharf, on the boardwalk. Yeah. Those were good days, boy. Yeah, he did, Franz did the CYA camp on Empire Grade. Franz would come to work with a pair of loafers on, pair of Levi's, with a white t-shirt, with a ruler, a tape in his Levi's, and he could do any job. And that's how he came to work. 100 degrees or 30 degrees. And he maybe had a rough night the night before, but he was always there at 8 o'clock working. He was something else, and he and I are still good friends. He lives in Anchorage, Alaska.
Starting to get cold up there right now.
Yeah, you know what he did when he went to Alaska? Did schools for Indian Eskimo schools,
Sure.
radiant heat. I mean, he had the knowledge. He just he said, I want to work in the bush. And so he worked out in the bush doing all these Indian schools and commercial jobs. Yeah, he's still living. Franz would be probably, I'm 82, so he's pretty close to the same age. Yeah.
You're 82?
I'm 82.
Okay.
Beat up
No, brother, you still go out and do it.
at
No.
82.
Okay, I see Jim Anderson. Is that his name?
Jim Anderson was a foreman. Jim Anderson did the first big job I remember him on was Dominican Hospital. And the last job, and I worked on the Dominican Hospital with him as an apprentice. And the last job he did was DoubleTree in, and he fell off the boiler down there and broke a leg or an arm. And his job was almost done, and I went down and finished the job. It had about 1,000 punch list items to open a hotel in Monterey, Doubletree Inn, on Laguna Race Day. And I got all those things done. And then I got a phone call on Saturday night. It had already opened. There's hot water in a lot of the toilets. And Franz Baum and I went down there and fixed everything. That would have been $1 million loss easily. We took the tanks off of toilets, took designer wallpaper, cut a square out and pinned it up, cut our way into these chases that were all blown with insulation, and crossed 2-inch copper pipes with 90s and 45s to switch them over. Risers coming through the floor. Franz was good. We were both good. We were the same breed, same time, same era.
Get it done.
Get it done. Yeah.
It must be pretty different out there now, I'm thinking.
I think it is different. I think I worked for Wilson's for, I think, 30 years before I bought my own plumbing business. And but always remained friends and respected them a whole bunch. You know, we got along.
Did you actually compete against each other?
We competed. I was just going to do service and repair work at first, but I had it in my blood to bid work and started bidding work at the University of California and Lockheed and places that I knew how to get it done. So I believe I probably became a little bit of a thorn in their side, but we always got along.
No, competitor, because I remember seeing you up at the university when I was in grad school.
Yeah.
Working jobs, and Greg worked up there.
Yeah, and Greg, both of my boys became journeymen for me when I bought this plumbing business, and they both went through a apprentice training. I remained union and kept doing that kind of work.
They both worked for Wilson too, though.
Well, Greg later on, he did not like being in a building that was confining, and I got him a job working for Granite Construction, and things kind of went south for me with the two boys growing up in my business, and they ended up, both of them, working for Wilson's at different times. Greg ran a science building, but that was not for Wilson's, for another company up at the university. Greg became a very good plumber.
David was a great plumber.
And David was very, very smart. He could do any kind of a job.
So they both worked for him too.
Yeah.
I see a name on here that I don't know, Roy Wilson.
Roy Wilson was, he was a plumber that did, we'd call it dingbats then. At the time I went to work for Wilson's, they did all work, from houses to condos and later on the non-union came in more, and we didn't do that kind of work. But Roy Wilson did, one of his big jobs that comes to mind is Paul Dunes. Yeah, and he did a good job out there.
That was a big job.
A big job, yeah, like 200 units or something like that, or quite a few.
Was he any relation to the Wilson family?
No.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Now, did you ever? Now, you must have worked with Goldie here, Mike Goldsmith, when he was young, up front.
Yeah, Mike Goldsmith. He was an estimator here.
Okay.
I left, I think, just before he came. Yeah.
You left after the 80s. I mean, 88, 87 in there?
I think right at 80, yeah.
Because I had just dropped out of grad school.
Yeah.
Went out on your own. Okay. He was here then?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. He and I grew up together.
Okay.
Yes. And Tommy and him.
Mike Reitman was like an estimator, maybe general manager for a while about that time that I left.
Okay, and then it seemed to me, maybe I'm wrong. I know all the Kirbys, but I don't know how they're all blended and who's whose uncle and whatever. Seemed like almost all the Kirby brothers worked here at one time.
At one time, there's 5 boys. All the boys worked here, and their dad worked here. And while I worked here, I worked with Billy Kirby. He and I were the main, when we were working, we were the main guys working on a job. And Ray Kirby was a plumber. Rich Kirby was a foreman like I was. And we always trying to run the big jobs as they came in. Wilson's won a big job. Richard Kirby was a good buddy of mine, and we competed a lot. Let's get her done. Richard Kirby was another one of those guys. And Billy Kirby was also. And there was a John Kirby, and there was an Ed Kirby, who was a backhoe operator for them. Yeah.
John Kirby, the football player?
Yeah.
He worked here too?
Well, I don't know. John may have worked here a summer or something.
Okay.
But not too much.
Okay. Because he was a ref and umpire when I was
Right.
growing up here.
Right.
And I think he taught, maybe. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, he
All right.
became a
What
teacher.
about Wayne Kirby? Who was his dad?
That would be Ray Kirby.
Ray Kirby was his dad. And Ray worked here, right?
Yeah, Ray was a plumber here. He was one of the main plumbers. He had his own truck, and he went out on jobs.
So
Always.
kind of a Kirby family thing going on here. Kind of a inner family circle.
Yep.
And you were part of that circle for sure, right?
Oh yeah. So I worked probably 20 years. Ran work for, 15, and then Walter Tiemann was a superintendent. He ran the whole show. And he was getting ready to retire, and he got some hardening of the arteries. And when he left, my name came up, got thrown in the hat, and so to be general superintendent of Monterey, Salinas, and Santa Cruz. So for quite a few years there, I was here, Monterey, Salinas, and Santa Cruz, and I picked the foremans to run the jobs and oversee the jobs and kept track of the jobs, and did that for about 5 years. And that was more stressful for me than running a job. Had no control. The jobs start going south, start hurting a little bit. You want to know why? It's the nature of the beast. Get behind on a job, you need more men, job's getting away from you, you got to hire travelers from other locals. Things get pretty tough when it starts going that way. And I did not like that. You don't have that control. When you're running a job yourself, you can get in and kick butt and you can bring it out. And I learned that from Bob Johnson. I remember doing Cabrillo College. We did with Bob Johnson. He did the cafeteria and he did the gymnasium. And I remember on the cafeteria, he says, we're running out of labor on this job. We got to get it done. And we ran 2 pipes through the roof on the cafeteria, all the vents tied together. Every one of them tied together from all the bathrooms and everything to 2 vents going through the roof. And I remember Bob and I did that in about a week. He just had these tricks and these knacks where you didn't hardly have to measure things, where he'd run the trunk line and swing these big arms out and measure them down to the vent on the fixture. And he was just smart. So I was fortunate to learn a lot of tricks from him.
Physically, how trying was the work?
It could be trying. I got 2 shoulders probably from running 48-inch pipe wrenches around, and that was not Crystal Springs. That was up in Felton. It was a job up in the hills, and Bob Johnson was running it, and we ran them 4-inch galvanized all over the hills with 48-inch pipe wrenches, chain tongs, pipe benders, putting the pipe together 95 degrees. You couldn't touch a wrench, so hot. And it was just grunt work that to do it, you had to have little tricks too. Yeah, and Bob Johnson had them. Yeah, I believe he was the foreman on that job. Yeah. Start thinking back, you forget about them, but you start thinking about all the jobs he did, and everyone was a challenge and fun to do. Yeah,
Well, that was the other thing. It seemed like the crew had fun.
we did.
There was like a camaraderie, or
Oh, there was.
what was that? What was that like? Working with all these guys, did you feel like teammates, or how did that
Oh
work?
yeah, oh yeah, yep. It really was.
Bonded with the guys.
All good friends. Oh yeah, everybody became friends. And there was a local pub across the street called Boradori's and Bay's Bar on Bulkhead Street. And we'd meet up there from time to time after work, have a beer or two, or maybe 3 sometimes. We got in a little bit of trouble over that once in a while.
My memory is a little bit of pool, maybe billiards,
Oh yeah, we used to play pool.
and probably a little dice. What were some of the other diversions over there?
Pool and dice, liar's dice, stuff like that. Yeah.
Anything ever happen around that with you?
Oh, when I first went to work there, J.A. Jones was the general manager, and Ed Welbrook was the purchasing agent, and they liked to go to Boradori's and play liar's dice. And I did spend one night down there when I first went to work there, and it was a problem. I think I had to hawk my shotgun to get back in my wife's good graces. Yep.
And you used to play a little pool down there.
Yeah, no, I was a good pool shooter. Yep. Yep.
So, of course, that was right across the street almost.
It was directly across the street, and probably half the shop would go there. So it was a definitely a vice.
Well, a little way to let off steam probably, and bond, and get rid of the tensions of the day.
There were some good plumbers over there that probably drank too much, but they were really good plumbers. They always showed up to work on time and put in 8 hours work. And Franz Baum being one of them, and there was David Booth. He was one of the top plumbers, ran a lot of big work for him, passed away. Yeah.
Well, when looking back now, 100 years, what do you think one of the legacies is of George H. Wilson in the community as a whole?
Oh, they had a lot to do with building this town. They worked with when Lockheed came to town and built the missile site up on the Empire Grade. They went in partners with Serpa, Shamrock, and Winks. It was Wilson's, Serpa, Shamrock, and Winks. And J. Jones was the general manager. Saw an opportunity here to build Wilson's up. And Walter Tiemann was the foreman. Bob Johnson was one of the sharp guys that ran a lot of work that he never saw before. We didn't see this kind of work, but they knew how to get it done. Read the specifications and do it.
Yes.
And I mean, George H. Wilson just did so many important buildings in Santa Cruz. They had a lot to do with Santa Cruz growing.
Well, that happened before I was aware of stuff.
Right.
So this boom time that must have happened in Santa Cruz in the 50s, early and mid 60s, must have been, for you, a kid who grew up in Santa Cruz, must have seemed like, wow, this is...
It was great for me to be able to work on these big jobs. Where would I have ever got that kind of experience? University of California, science buildings, dormitories, big buildings, boilers, all kinds of work that I would never have seen. I was very fortunate to be working for Wilson's. They were really progressive. They had estimators bidding all these jobs and getting the ones they could. And of course, if I was on the finishing a job, I was always looking forward to them getting another big job so I could run it. And if they got one, I had a good crack at it. It's a lot of it to do with timing.
Of all the jobs, what do you think your most favorite job was?
Well, probably putting in a room at Wrigley's that was upstairs, and it was a big empty room about 100 foot by 200 feet, big, empty. And we installed two Ingersoll big chillers in there, Centrovac chillers that we had to cut a hole in the roof and drop them down in there, and two big Ingersoll ran compressors on big floating isolation pads like that, with pumps and cooling towers and everything to go along with that, the system that we were putting in, and filled that whole room up with mechanical equipment. And I had Billy Kirby, I had two welders, and I had an old timer I was kind of taking care of. He could make up flanges with big socket wrenches. And Billy and I would cut and fit 6 and 8 inch pipe. It'd be laying on the floor. We measured everything out, and we cut it and fit it and tacked it. And I think it was about a 3-month job. We put this whole thing together. And I remember the estimator, Fred Meister, came to me and he said, Leroy, I want to ask you something. I said, what's that, Fred? He says, how could you do that job for half of the estimated labor? It's probably something you shouldn't have told me. Made me feel pretty good, you know, but that's the kind of thing we did, Billy and I. If I had two welders working for me, they were welding. They weren't measuring and cutting and fitting. They were welding all the time. And you get a lot of welds in a day. That job went fast because it was all welded pipe. And Fred says that kind of work is easy. So I told him, and it was for me, because it's center to center measurements. And you work down to a pump, and it was nothing complicated about it. A lot of other jobs, science buildings, much more complicated. All the lab piping down to tables and stuff, small, but all had to be precise. So that was probably one of my jobs that I remember feeling pretty good about. And of course, if we got them done, and we know that they made money, which we never knew for sure, because they're not going to tell you too much, but they say good job or something like that. That's all we needed.
Okay, so if you're standing outside of Wrigley and you're facing the building, was it on the left, on the big cement concrete slabs?
It was on the right. It was on the corner.
On the right corner?
On the right corner,
Okay.
as you drive into the loading dock area.
Yeah.
Everything to the left was an add-on that I did also with Billy.
Okay, that's the
Simple,
normal.
simple
Yeah.
job. The other part was upstairs over the, where they had all the chewing gum machines.
Where the loading dock was.
Yeah,
Okay.
hundreds of Wrigley's chewing gum. I did another job there. It was pretty interesting. It was a pumping a chicle job. Chicle is what they make that gum with, and these pumps were not very big, and they had a 2-inch nozzle on them, and we hooked a 2-inch pipe, and we encased the pipe with 3-inch pipe, cut a hole in each end, welded them off, cut a hole in each end, and put in steam on the top and condensate out the bottom. Of each one of those pieces, 20-foot sections of pipe, and we run all this pipe down through that building and to a pump, and with by steam heating the chicle, you could pump it with a real slow moving, but it had a lot of pressure, chicle pumps. That was a very interesting job, and that was a get it done job. 2 crews. I think I worked like 16 hours a day. I was a foreman on the job, and had two separate crews because they want it done, you know.
Wow, there must have been also satisfaction knowing that you're doing this work that's creating all these jobs for all these Santa Cruzans. I mean, it was a big contribution to the local economy.
Yeah, that. Also, the men working on it. Hey, we made good money. We wanted to make Wilson's money. The union plumber made good money. I always felt we just made great money, and we're gonna make the company money because we also are making good money. Always had that in the back of our heads. I did, at least.
So it was
Not all plumbers were that way, but we had an honor to make money and work for George Wilson and do the jobs we did. Billy Kirby and I mean, really, yeah.
okay,
Rich Kirby was the same way.
Chris?
Richard,
Oh, Richard.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you worked with him for a long time.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I want to ask 1 or 2 more questions. One of the things I remember, and I don't know if this may or may not be included, but I remember you also probably did a lot of this. Because when I was a kid, you did a job for my dad that I think was not through Kirby, maybe, not through Wilson, but you did our irrigation system out in Soquel for our pastures.
Yeah, we did some work out there. Yeah, I'd helped your dad out there.
That was like on weekend work.
Yeah, I was just helping your dad. Your dad and I were great friends and hunted together. And actually, I think I started him steelhead fishing and hunting.
Both.
Both, yeah.
And, which he did to the day he died. But what I remember is, I remember being a hot summer day and you being out there doing this stuff. And I don't know what the deal was with them, but you were working on your days off doing plumbing too, and I bet you did more of that, right? I mean, you used to take care of Nunna's place and stuff.
Oh, I used to do different. Yeah, I was working. I was a workaholic. Yeah, I worked a lot. And if a friend needed work, at the time, I went to work. I was an apprentice. All the trades helped each other out. I built a house for my family on the Heather Court, and I traded labor with the sheet metal guys, electricians. I built a house 1 year there by myself with the help of different trades, and it was back in the days that very, very cheap. But all the trades traded labor if they starting out to build their first house. That was pretty common. Richard Kirby and I did that, and other people too. Bobby Wilson did my electrical.
Never knew that.
Never knew that. Ray Kirby came over and helped. Franz Bond came over and helped with my plumbing. Rich Kirby did my sheet metal. and I built a house on Heather Court there, a custom house. Back in the day, it was be in the 67 or 8. Let's see, 56, no. Yeah. 2,000 square foot house, built it for about $20,000. Yeah. 1 year I spent
Yeah.
every day after work and every weekend getting that house built. Yeah.
You were living on the rent when you did that.
I think I lived on the rent, yeah.
Yeah. No, I remember because
Yeah.
Dad did ours the year before, I think.
Yeah, you guys lived over on Sadie Street.
And Sadie, and then we built that house out of.
Yeah, out there in the Cherry Blossom Lane.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Anything else you want to talk about with about Wilson? Anything else you'd like to say? What about work? Did you work much with Jim?
Jim didn't work in the field much. He liked to help out if he came on a job. He'd like to get a torch and do some soldering. And so actually doing any work in the field with him, not too much. I remember working with Jack Nichols, and that's way back when. And he was a service plumber for the shop there, and one of George H. Wilson's favorites. Jack Nichols was a different person. I've worked with him in an attic, and I would never forget. He cut off a piece of pipe with a hacksaw, and he's like a half an hour. We got sawzalls now, and they go, but he would have a hacksaw in a tight spot, and he cut that piece of pipe off for a half an hour, and he never stopped, laying on the side. I'm holding the flashlight for him. He was something else. And back in the day, he used to sewer rod sewers. Jack Nichols did go out on a sewer job, so I'd go to help him. He'd put all these rods together, 6-foot rods together to make a snake, to do a long snake. Yeah.
Now I'm thinking one more question. Because a lot of people don't think about sewer jobs when they think about plumbing, but I know that they do it here because we had a discovery at our house after the earthquake. Turned out one of our major lines had cracked.
Yeah.
And that created backup and all sorts of problems.
Oh, yeah.
So, did you ever have any nasty sewer jobs you ever had to do?
Oh. I'm trying to think, well, with Jack Nichols, putting these snakes through, they used to have a sewer pipe called Orangeburg, and it would collapse, and it would get like that instead of round, and you get it caught. You couldn't get it out, and then we'd have to go dig the street up or dig it up and find out that it was gone. We had to put new sewer lines in. But a job I remember, I was an apprentice, and I'm trying to think, the guy's name was Parsons, who was a foreman. And there's on the boardwalk or on the ocean in Capitola, there was a sewer outfall there by the theater.
Into the Esplanade.
We converted it into a lift station. It's down like 30 feet under the ground. You go down a ladder, go down these stairs, and there's this room that's a big square room. And this is where all the crap went into. And from there, they didn't treat it. This is the old days, huh? It went from there out into the ocean. And it was a sewer outfall. And they maybe treated it with chlorine or something, but it was not like the sewer treatment we got today. And we converted that we had to jackhammer these big holes into this big tank, and the crap in there was this thick. We had rubber boots on working in there. And every day I came home, I had to take all my clothes off and put them in the washing machine and wash them. It was so bad. And Bud Parsons ran that job. That was a job. That was really a job. Yeah. A lot of interesting jobs. If there was a plumbing job, if it was hard, whatever it was, Wilson's went after those kind of big jobs. And, they could probably get a better price for them. A lot of people around Santa Cruz couldn't handle them. So, yep, it was some interesting work. Yep. Yeah, Bud Parsons,
Okay.
Bud Parsons, he used to do all the work at Campbell Soup up the coast here.
Was that a Wilson gig?
That was a lot of steam piping there. And I think Bud Parsons,
Pescadero?
yeah. Hmm.
That was the George H. Wilson job?
That was George H. Wilson take care of job. I don't know if they built it originally, but of course, right close there, Pigeon Point is where the lighthouse is. Bob Johnson did a job there. There was a bunch of buildings there. We put a bunch of new buildings in for the Coast Guard, and I'll never forget. Bob said, "Come on, we gotta get going. We gotta get going." So, we're driving clear to Pescadero almost, and when No Mooring got there, and he says, "Oh shit, Leroy, you got to go back to Santa Cruz." Forgot something, and I did not want to run into George H. Wilson back at the shop because he knew where everybody was going. He was every morning. Those trucks got to get out of there and get heading out to the job. He watched that all the time. So you want to get going. You want to make sure you had what you needed early, and we all came to work early. 8 o'clock we tried to get out of there. It changed, and people wouldn't even start getting material sometimes till 8 o'clock. But in the old days, got material and got out of there. Yeah, it was fun.
Did George H. catch you when you got back that day?
I don't remember. I don't think so because I would get it and get going. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, so you did Campbell Soup.
Yeah, I did a job up there
Where?
at Pescadero for Musi, Red Marquis, Campanati. It was during, you know where Bean Hollow is?
Of course.
Well,
On top of the hill up there.
Well, Bean Hollow is down on the bottom. It's a pond.
Right, the pond. up
And
on
so
the
we
hill.
put in about 5 or 6 50-horsepower pumps during the year of the drought to help those farmers up there get water to their fields from different spots that the wells were going dry and everything. So right there at before you get to Bean Hollow, up across from Pigeon Point, there's a pond. So one of the jobs was to hook up to that pond water and get water to a field that they were planting. So there was a 12-inch line came out of that pond and went across the highway over to another ranch across by Pigeon Point. And Red Marquis was there. And I had a 12-inch valve that I could not get shut off 100%. And there was a 6-inch line went over here to a pump. And on this side of the 12-inch line came down. There was two lines came off. One of them went to a pump. This one had a blank flange on it. So my job was to hook up to that blank flange with a length of 6-inch pipe, 20 feet, come out of the ground with a valve on it. So we could use that pond water and then hook this big pump up to that valve. So I started taking the flange off. We had the pipe fabricated, had it laying in the trench, had Marvin Brown. I had Jack McCoy, who was a welder, the real McCoy welder. And we had this all fabricated, and I started pulling that flange off, and the water's shooting out. And we go up and put a big pipe wrench on that big valve, and we got it as tight as we could, and there's still water coming out. I said, okay, you guys, we're going to go for it. We're going to go. I'm going to pull these last 2 bolts off, and when that flange pops off, we're going to shove this pipe in there and push the gland and the rubber up, and I'll get it bolted up. So I'm up in front, and those guys behind me in the ditch. The 6-inch stream of water hit me in the chest, knocked me down. These guys were scrambling out of the trench. Eyes all bugged out, and Red Marquis there. You're going to lose my pond. I'm going to lose all the water from his pond. So we thought about it for a little bit, and I said, Marvin, get on the backhoe and dig the trench down, get the water level down. So he dug it over the edge of the hill, got the water level down. We got the boom truck, we had a boom truck there, we had the equipment, and we put a shackle around that pipe, got a thing, and we just jacked that pipe in there, and pushed the gland up, pushed the rubber up, and got it bolted up. Saved his pond. So I got in that night, and Jim Wilson asked me, hey, he says, what happened up the coast today? He says, I heard you had some problems. And I said, you don't even want to know what happened, Jim. I think I told him later, but I don't think I told him anything that night. But we lucked out. Things like that happen. And you just fought your way through it.
Pond's still there.
The pond's still there, yeah.
Yeah. We got the property right above it right now, my partners and I.
What?
We have the property right above it right now.
Above that pond?
Yeah. Up on the hill where the,
Before Bean Hollow?
you go up Bean Hollow Road, go down and up.
Well, on the other side of the pond, the Bean Hollow, back at the end, there was a pump house and there was a big pump there, and we ran, I think it was a 10-inch Schedule 80 PVC line all the way up the hill, goes up on top.
Yeah.
That would be to Campanati's property.
It's now Bay City or Space City Farms.
Do you have to come in from Pescadero to get up
No,
there?
you can get up there from there now.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I got to take a ride up there.
Well,
Been a
let's
while.
go up. You took me on a ride, I'm gonna take you on a ride.
Okay, sounds
Okay.
good. Okay, I'd like to do it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, 70 acres up on top.
Oh,
It's all
good.
greenhouses and stuff.
Oh, wow, yeah, that got to be there at Campanati's property.
Yeah, it is. It's so
Small world.
Japanese grower bought it,
Oh,
and they bought a lot of stuff in Half Moon Bay and just outside of Half Moon Bay. But I used to go up there to fish for
bass.
Beach. No, mostly perch. Big perch up there.
Oh, on the beach.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
and then in the kelp beds,
Yeah.
rock cod,
Mm-hmm.
grass cod, green grass cod. Yeah, that was my spot
I'll be darned.
40 years ago.
40 years ago. Wow.
Yeah, my 20s. Think we got it
This
covered.
this has. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, so I wanted to ask you just a couple quick questions. So one of the things we were gonna do today, who we were gonna have you interview with was it
Richard Kirby. Richard Kirby.
So then I'm curious, what was your working relationship with Rich, and then what are some of your fondest memories or great stories? Because obviously we wanted you both to be together to kind of share stories.
Richard Kirby and I were the best of friends, and we fished together, we hunted together, and we worked together. And he was a top foreman for Wilson's, and he became the field superintendent for Wilson's, as I was one of the top foremen plumbing wise, and I became the field superintendent. So our jobs were identical, and except that I was in the plumbing and he was in the sheet metal. And so we've been the best of friends forever, and he's still around. So sorry he couldn't make it here today because he wasn't feeling good. And but he and I deer hunted together, packed in and hiked in. I hunted with his family up at McLeod Flats out of Shasta, and with his dad, his brothers. They were quite a family.
So I'm sure that made coming to work a little more fun.
Oh yeah. Well, we were good.
Best friend.
We were good friends, and we were all doing the same job, all doing the same thing. Yeah.
And then my last question is, what do you remember about October 1989? We have our famous earthquake, and you come into work the next day, or what was that atmosphere like? The days and weeks following the great earthquake.
He wasn't here.
I wasn't here.
Oh, you weren't here.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I had moved
Yeah.
on and
Oh,
bought a
okay.
small plumbing company and did my own thing for years, and that was during that time.
Okay.
Madison Lane, wasn't Was it on Madison?
Yeah, it's on Madison Lane. I still have the shop.
Yeah.
I kind of hung on to the property and I just retired from the business.
Okay.
Yeah. I remember when I first went to work for Wilson's, one of my jobs was to vacuum all the bins out. They had to empty all the bins from the '56 flood. And everything was wiped out in that '56 flood.
55.
55, 56.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was right around
There you
the Christmas time.
go.
Yeah, it was 55 flood, yeah. But the bins all had mud in them that thick, up 5 feet high in the shop.
And you had to vacuum them out every day or just once?
I had to go through and get them all clean again. Yeah, just once. See, I've
So you
always
were downtown at the downtown shop.
always worked at the downtown shop.
Yeah.
Never worked here at this.
So the downtown shop was completely flooded.
Flooded out, yeah. The El Rio trailer park was right across the street, and everything is flooded straight across town. Yeah.
So you had to clean up after that when you first started.
Yeah.
What was that? Do you remember what that was like? Coming in the next day or after doing it? And
I had, I remember just looking for a job and I ended up, that was one of the things I had to do. I mean, I was a flunky around there and swept the floors and helped customers and cut and thread pipe for them and swept up every day, and that's what I did. And tried to impress George H. Wilson, the old man, we called him. That's what we called him, the old man. I actually got to see him several days before he passed away. He was 99.9, and I had been calling Jim Wilson that I'd like to see your dad before he goes. And Jim called me one day, and I was not working for him then. And he said, you could go see my dad today if you wanted to. So I said, I will. And I went up past the Emple and walked in there, and he was laying there in a bed, and he was a pretty shriveled up little old man then. And he saw me, and his face lit up. And I hadn't seen him for quite a few years. He said, Leroy. And he's just like, we had a really good relationship. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's all I had. I was just curious about the relationship with Mr. Kirby, so that's good.
And is he gonna come back?
We'll get him at some
And you
point,
can do
yeah.
that interview?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, Rich is a really good guy.
His son and I went to high school together and played ball together.
Wayne?
No, Craig, they're cousins.
Oh, okay.
Ray Kirby is Wayne's dad, Rich is Craig's dad.
Right.
And one day I am driving up to see my father in Northeast Oregon. This is after he left. And I was right about Shasta, and I look in my old red Volkswagen van. This is way out of town. I look, and there's Craig Kirby up near their place in McLeod.
Yeah, well, we used to go hunting up there in
Yeah.
McLeod Flats.
And he was with TJ, Tom Johnson.
Oh,
Big Tom Blue.
oh yeah,
Oh.
that's Too Tall. We're off the thing. I'll tell you a story about Too Tall.
Yeah,
And
I want to hear this, yeah.
we were hunting McLeod Flats.
Yeah.
And I had my son, David, and Greg, and we'd come through some trees, and I'd stopped because I had to go to the bathroom. And those guys were heading on. And I got done, and I turned around, and I look back there in the bushes, and I see these horns like this, going like that. Oh, I put it right here, shot, and the horns disappeared. And I went back there, and I had this big buck. And gutted it and cleaned it, and I caught up with those guys. And they said, we were making a drive through about 3 mile drive or something like that. They said, we heard a shot back there, what happened? And or Tom asking me, and I said, well, I got a nice buck back there, we'll get him when we all through. So we get on down the hill, And Dave is down in this draw, and he's on top of a big log that's laying down like this, and he's going crazy. And threw his gun, and so I ran down there. It was Yellow Jackets. And Tom Johnson, I said, David ran, he got stung 5 or 6 times, and the gun was laying there on a big log like that, and there's Yellow Jackets all over it. And I said, I'm gonna go get your gun for you, David. And Tom Johnson says, Mr. Cross, he says, you really got balls if you're gonna go get that gun. So Tom Johnson, I've known him forever.
I can hear that voice
Oh.
you say it.
So I ran in, Jeffrey. I buttoned all up. And I ran in, grabbed the gun, turned left, fell down, and the Yellow Jacket nest was right there, right in my face. So as I jumped up and I started running, and I'm running toward Tom Johnson. He said, "Don't!" They're all scattered. They were following me. Don't run this way. That's some good times with Tom Johnson.
I just saw him 2 days ago.
He stops by my house every once in a while.
He said, yeah,
Yeah,
he's a great kid.
yeah, he is.
So yeah, I'm way up there, driving up to see Frank in Northeast Oregon. I look over and there's Craig and TJ.
I'll be darned.
And, unbelievable.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, give Craig my best wishes if you get a chance.
I'll be talking to him.
Okay.
I'll be calling Tiemann. Dick Tiemann lives in Missoula,
Okay.
and we're going elk hunting Montana in November. So
All right.
I'll be seeing him up there.
Pray for him. Love that
Yeah,
kid.
yeah. Yeah, pretty sad deal with Craig. He just moved up there last year.
Yeah, I heard he quit Slater or retired from
He
Slater.
retired, yeah.
God bless him.
Yeah.
Thank you, Leroy.
All right.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Stop recording here.